it's an open invitation if anybody wants to come over. And, you know, I agree. I think it would be really interesting to do more of those types of tours, like to the various communities. I think you always learn a lot by seeing where someone is from. If anybody wants to come over, and, you know,
You got an echo.
Yeah, just because you are now live.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for coming, everyone. We'll get started. We'll call the meeting to order. I think we have a declaration. We have everybody here. Declaration of a quorum. We don't have any visitors to my knowledge. I don't see anybody else there. First off, I'd like to make sure there's no conflict of interest. Declarations to be made. You've all had a look at the agenda, so none of those. Okay. I'd like to have the adoption of the agenda. If you've all had a chance to look at it and agree with the agenda, if I get to have someone move that it be adopted as presented.
Move that we accept the agenda for tonight.
Thanks, John. Hey, thanks, Harvey. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay. You've all had a chance to look at the minutes of the board meeting February 22nd, 2024. And if you've all had a chance to do that, no comments or questions. If we could have someone move that they be adopted as presented.
I'll move that we adopt the minutes from February 22nd.
Thanks, John. And Al, I saw your hand go up as seconder. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you, everyone. A business arising from the previous minutes, Hollis, you were going to talk a little bit about committee structures.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just bringing this back from a previous meeting about the committee structure, and it was pretty much decided that we're not going to have a new standing committee, but the committee of the whole is going to function as that stand-in for the standing committees that we previously had, plus and as you saw at our last meeting, I'm developing a structure for those committee meetings that, you know, even if there's nothing there, there'll be a section for finance and audit, there'll be a section for HR issues, there'll be a section for all of those things, and then plus we can use the rest of that committee time for what I had initially suggested as a subcommittee, but it does make more sense, we'll admit, to just bring it to that particular committee. And then beyond that, the subcommittees that would be not necessarily board members, but for each particular service that we have. I did have that list here somewhere, but so the subcommittees for tourism, for recreation, for community services, for economic development, and transportation, namely. And then we also have the standing committees for the landfill and PRAC are obviously standing committees. But these other ones, the 5 subcommittees, don't necessarily have to have board members on them. There can be, but there doesn't have to be. And we have those established last year. We used them fairly extensively for the strategic planning. So they met a lot, and then that plan was developed. And since that time, you know, getting things underway, some committees have met, some have not so much. And I know there's an upcoming meeting for landfill to be scheduled, and a couple of others. But I want to put this on the agenda so we didn't, first of all, so we didn't lose it. And at the next committee of the whole meeting, I'll present the current membership as it is. And the discussion I would like to have with you folks here tonight is we'll make a sort of a generic terms of reference for the subcommittees. We know what the standing committees are. We know how that operates. But those subcommittees that are specific to those services, I'm looking for input on particular terms of reference. A couple of suggestions that I have is that we include, and we have for the most part already, we're already mostly there anyway, but that we make sure that we include subject matter experts on the particular topics that have some kind of a regional focus or some kind of a, could be in their day-to-day work, or it could be in something else that they have experience in. that we include those types of folks on those committees. Those committees are meant to be advisory committees only. So they would be the committees where staff would go to either bounce ideas or get advice on, or have things that get brought forward to the committee of the whole meeting. And so the board committee hears that from those subcommittees, any suggestions or recommendations that they would have. And we can articulate that in a set of terms of reference, but I wanted to make sure before I went any further that I'm on the right track in terms of what you're thinking, or if you have different ideas to put into that. So I'm gonna put that back to you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Thank you. Comments from board? Okay. Oh, sorry, Bonnie, I didn't see your hand up there. I was looking right at you too.
I'm a little slow tonight. I think the other thing that we had talked about when we set up the committees for strategic planning is also that there be representation across communities. And I know this is a bit one of my sticking points at times, but I think it's important that we have the perspective from Graham and Ann, from Campbell, from across the region, so that we do have that pan-regional focus and we're not focused in on specific areas. And I think that that's an important component for me, that we continue to have that. And maybe this is a discussion for committee of the whole, but I do think it would be good if the committees were maybe a little bit more active than what they have been. And I know things have been busy and things have been moving along, but really, I think a lot of them, other than tourism, when you look at the list that Megan had said, they haven't met since for a year. And so I think, in my mind, I thought the committees, because there was somebody, I mean, ours are mostly, I think, counselors. My concept was that they were taking the perspectives from Graham and Ann to the region on these committees about each of those subjects, and we're then feeding into the board. But if the committees aren't meeting and those perspectives aren't going to the committees, then I'm not really clear how the views from my council, from my community, are feeding into the regional process. And I'm not sure I've articulated that well, but that's one of the things that I've been struggling with a little bit, honestly, with the committees.
Yeah, maybe what we can do is, Hollis, if you want to jump in, you go right ahead. You look like you were going to make a comment.
Yeah, the only other thing that I guess I neglected to mention was we had talked about having a schedule, like for the year, a predetermined schedule for when these committees meet, and we kind of lay that all out for, say, a year in advance, so that we know, and so those folks can also schedule their time as well, so that we also ensure that they are meeting. Although, honestly, if there's nothing, I don't think it's good to have pointless meetings where there's nothing to discuss, but I don't think that's ever going to be the case in these particular services. So even a quick meeting to see where things are. Again, these are advisory committees. They don't make decisions. They did help the decision-making process at this table. But we had talked about having a schedule for all of the committees a year ahead. So I want to make sure that we have that captured as well.
Okay. Let's get half of your comments, Bonnie. But we'll make sure there's representation on all the committees. Anybody that wants to be on them can be. Okay. The next one is well, I should ask, is there anything else under old business that anybody wants to bring up? No, so we'll move into new business, and that would be fuel tanks.
Yeah. So this is a new issue that came up. And I really just need to kind of, I want to tell you about this, but so as a result of Department of Environment, some investigations as a result of fires and things like that, it's been determined that the fuel tanks when I talk about fuel tanks, there's a bulk diesel tank and a bulk gasoline tank that we fuel vehicles with. There is a generator that's an older one that's a diesel generator, that the fuel tank no longer meets standards, single wall, and it's 20 odd years old. There's another generator The fuel tank itself is fine, but it needs, it doesn't meet code for venting and a few other things. Then at the bulk station itself, the tanks themselves are that old, on top of the containment area that right now it's on gravel. So there's bulk tanks that are there, and then we fuel the tanks that are on gravel. There is a containment system underneath, but it's like a bladder kind of system, but we're required to have a concrete and containment and things like that. Anyway, long story short, quote came back to bring us up to code was $73,000. Now, a couple of those things are going to be like, for instance, the older generator of the single wall tank. The solution there was that we have an external tank, a new external tank placed, but that's going to require concrete and containment as well as then the plumbing to the generator. But the generator is so old that it also needs repairs. So I think the simpler answer there is just new generator, because it's also oversized. It's a 60 kilowatt generator. We don't need a 60 kilowatt generator there anymore. We've improved it. That's the building that has the heat pump in it, the ground source heat pump and things like that. We're gonna have somebody look at what our actual needs are. I'm guessing it's like 20 or 25 kilowatt. So for the same kind of money as the repairs in the generator and the new fuel tank, I think we can just put a new generator there, but still. There's outlays that weren't planned for in the budget. So my thought was we have done some work, some preliminary work on getting ready to put out an RFP to do a study on the landfill and the leachate treatment system to see, and we have money in the budget for this. We can defer that to next year. We put 100,000 in the budget for that study. I don't know that it would cost 100,000, but we put that in there to be safe. But we can defer that to next year, just to make sure we don't eat into the budget of some of the other things, because this was unplanned. We had talked about fuel tanks a few years ago, but we at that time decided that they're probably okay. Turns out they're not. So just so everybody's aware, these fuel tanks that we have, they're all double walled, and they have like a vacuum gauge, like to check, and the vacuums have all failed. So the tanks are failed at this point. They're not leaking. Nothing is leaking. There's nothing to clean up. But we do need to do something fairly soon. So I wanted to make the board aware of this kind of situation and the fact that I do want to defer that study until next year to ensure that we're not over budget on our other expenses.
What's the cost of doing tanks?
73,000.
Okay, if I said it, but
Al, you had a question?
Yeah, forgive me. I can't figure out how to put my hand up on this device I'm using, but am I muted still? No. Okay. So I want to go back to Hollis, your comment about the generator being oversized. Is that for the scale house office area?
Yes.
Okay. So my other question is, what is your requirement when the power is out for that building? Anyways, you don't have to run the whole building. Like maybe just run what you need to run.
The intent on that building has always been that it was it could be used as an emergency shelter or even as a auxiliary REOC. Several years ago, before my time, I guess there was a lot of flooding that cut off the number 3 of the 127. So that there is no actual requirement to directly answer your question, but that was always the intent that building would run. And it also, that building itself is where all of our communications run out of. So all of our fiber optics that run all over the site terminate there, and that is where the network is. So if that building doesn't have power, we have no communications at all, including phone.
Yeah, but you're talking, but that's not a big user. That's not a big wattage to run that fiber ops and stuff. I'm just trying to think of if you can get the size of the generator down, that's more manageable and cost worthy. And
that's what I'm thinking. Like a 20 kilowatt would probably be more than enough.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That makes that makes sense to me. We should definitely look into that path. On my opinion, I don't know about the rest of the board, but yeah.
Is that a diesel generator that's there now?
Yeah.
Do we have propane out there?
We have propane furnaces and stuff.
Cause those small Generacs in that range, are, you know, $7,000-8,000. You can buy them.
Yeah, I talked to Mike about, using propane instead of diesel, but the problem is if we have an extended outage, like a multi-day outage, then we gotta get propane. We have both diesel on site. And I don't think the diesel ones are very much more than the propane.
Probably not. The one in my new boat is about 20,000. I mean, it'd be a little bit different because that's raw water cooled, but yeah, so be probably in the 20,000.
Yeah.
I think Harvey brings up a good point. I know I just bought a brand new generator and it'll run on three. It'll run on diesel, it'll run on propane, and it'll run on natural gas. So a lot of them today, when you go to buy them, they have that multi-function or multi-use fuel use capability to maintain their usage. So I suspect if you go to buy one, they'll probably have that capability with them. But that's a good point on Harvey. I have a question. How did we determine who came in and said that our fuel tanks are no longer meeting code?
Department of Environment.
Okay.
DELG. And because we have to be a compliant site because of what we do, so we have a certificate of operation, so.
Yeah, okay.
Mr. Chairman, has the department given you a timeline when they expect it fixed?
No, not a definite one, just,
So it's not, we don't have 90 days.
we don't have an order written against us.
Yeah, okay, yeah, fine.
So these tanks prefabricated somewhere, or is it somewhere you gotta look for someone to build?
The tanks, there's a couple of suppliers for them. I think there's the tank shop up in northern New Brunswick, and I'm not sure where the other one is. We'll put it out to figure out what the best deal is.
That's important to meet the code because we don't want to spill. That'd be very expensive to clean up. Okay.
Do you require?
Sorry.
Do you require a motion for the board now?
No, I don't need a motion for the board because we can kind of contain this within the budget that was already approved, but I did want to make the board aware of this because it is a change to what I'm doing with the money.
Yeah.
Right, and it's a significant enough amount of money that,
I think it's a smart idea to fix it before we end up in a cleanup situation. That'd be a lot worse.
oh yeah.
I think I'd like to have a motion to that effect rather than just be for the record. I think maybe a motion to the effect of spending that amount of money on generators, on fuel tanks and generators. So if I could have someone make that motion, please.
I'll move that the money used set aside for the leachate what was it? Study be deferred for 1 year and that the money be used to replace or upgrade the tanks and generators.
I'm seconding.
Thank you. We have a seconder. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Thank you. Okay. The next one is the Tourism Reserve Fund. They're looking to move 80,000 from the Tourism Reserve Fund into the operating fund. Who is representing the tourism committee here?
That would be me, but I wouldn't be probably the best person to speak to this. I imagine Hollis would be.
Okay, we'll let Hollis speak to that one.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If you recall, before the end of the year last year, we moved some surpluses that we had in the tourism and economic development and a couple of it into reserve funds. We created those funds and we moved money. The reason that we did that for tourism specifically, which is the one I'm talking about, is because we had started on the website creation project, which is what the money was for. Most of that, well, actually, all of that money came from the transition funding from the province. However, we hadn't had the opportunity to complete the project, so we moved the money into the reserve, operating reserve. Because if we don't move it into the reserve, what happens is it ends up as a surplus and we can't access it until 2025. So the idea was to move it into reserve, but now we are getting down to, we're most of the way or halfway through that project, and we'll need access to that funding again.
Okay, any questions, anyone? Okay, can someone make that motion that we move 80,000 from tourism reserve fund into the operating fund?
I can.
Okay, thank you, Brad. A seconder?
One second.
Okay, not sure, I'm not sure who that was.
Yeah, John.
John, okay. Thanks, John. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
And
Okay, thank you.
So,
Committee and staff reports, we'll go to the first one, the CEO report, and certainly that's you, Hollis.
thank you, Mr. Chair. Was there anything else under new business anybody wanted to, before I started?
Well, I was gonna bring a subject up, I was really gonna hold it to the end, but I can talk about it now. In the provincial budget, we got a report from UMNB stating that the RSCs had received or were going to receive some additional funding to help them with the new priorities or the new responsibilities that we've taken on. Have you heard anything on that, Hollis?
That would be a part of that transition funding I just spoke to that we did receive towards the end of the year last year. Actually, I finally got the final on that one of the last days before, it was in December anyway. That was that initial part, and I believe that they had indicated that there might be more, but there's no timeline or amounts indicated at that time.
Okay, because the latest budget that just came out this week, there was additional funding in that. So that funding was actually allocated earlier. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. Anybody else have anything under new business? Okay. Over to you, Hollis, then, for the CEO report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My CEO report this month is a little different than normal. I don't have all of the staff reports there because I have them putting together the stuff for the annual report, which I should have out by the end of next week. It's due out by the end of March and we'll be on time this year with that. So I have some other points here from my experiences, I guess, for lack of a better term, over the last month. I do want to point out in the solid waste totals to have a look at that in my report. We are down in our amount of volume for 2024. This time I went back right to 2020, so you can see where we were at end of February the last 5 years running. So there is a somewhat significant difference. This is partially due to our foreign waste, but I was chatting with my counterpart in Moncton today. They're also seeing reduced volumes, and we're seeing that just about everywhere, reduced volumes in garbage. And his comment to me was one that I've used before, that the amount of garbage that we receive, the volume of garbage that we receive, is an indicator of economic activity. So it means that people have less garbage because they're buying less things. That could be playing into this as well. So I just want to make sure everybody's aware of where we are. 2 months is probably not good enough to predict the entire trend. There could be some anomalies there. I know that we were a little lower in our other RSC waste, but that's because they split it between us and another RSC. So it could be this time of year that they're taking more to the other one, and then the rest of it comes to us. We do have a contract for 50% of their waste. So one way or another, we get 50% of their waste over the year, and I know it was quite a bit lower than normal in January and February, so that's a piece of this as well. But I would just, nothing to panic over, but it's something to just to be aware of as, and we'll be keeping an eye on it and tracking on the sources of the waste as we go forward. Under planning activity, we have never ever, we haven't slowed down planning in years now, and this year is no exception. I'll say more of that. My other points are, so we did have a roundtable with the CAOs, specifically about housing. It was the day before we had our economic development meeting. And quite a few of our staff were there, plus we had a representative from the Housing Hub. Sounds like they've got several ambitious initiatives on the go from Housing Hub. We'll have to see how they play out. And I included in the package that I sent out, the presentation that we had. It's a collaboration between us and municipal and provincial, and it's kind of maps out the process of housing development, especially when it comes to affordable housing, things like that. Anyway, it's just something that is as an FYI, but this is something we went over with Housing Hub as well as the CAOs, just so everybody's clear on how the whole process works. There's another new initiative, I was in a meeting with the LG about, well, it was less than a month ago. And so I am on the provincial committee for RC branding and awareness, and this is something I've been talking about for a while. My feeling is, and was agreed by everybody else that was there, is that RSCs have a bit of an identity crisis. And we have a bit of an awareness problem. If you go to explain to anybody else what an RSC is, it's a difficult conversation. It's hard to explain what this is. So the concept here is that the province is funding all of this, that we're going to come up with some kind of a strategy to be able to communicate to the public what service commissions do, what the benefit is. And it just makes it that much simpler for you folks when you go to your people with something that the RSC is doing. They're like, why do we care about the RSC? At least you have something there to point to. So anyway, they put me on the committee. There's several of us on the committee, including folks from the province and some other CEOs and some other folks. And the province is going to hire a firm to do this branding and communications back for us, and they're going to pay for that. So it's a long time coming, and I'm glad we're going to be on. Other projects, our GIS specialist been involved. I was contacted by Tourism Heritage Culture. They were embarking on a project to map out all of the recreational assets in the province on maps, but those maps are going to include a lot of demographic data and the ability to pick an area and say draw out on the map, how many people live there, what the tax base is, blah, blah, blah. And the intent is for recreation planning. So if you're planning to build something, or you're looking into building any kind of an asset, like say it's an arena or a pool or whatever it is, you'll have all the data there to support that application, or to find it, if you're doing a feasibility study, it's available there for folks to look at very quickly and cut through. So anyway, so our specialist has been involved there, so we know what's going on. We'll be able to tap into this data as well for all of our other things that aren't necessarily recreation. So it's a good project that they're doing that we'll be able to take advantage of. In tourism, we did have a presence in Toronto for the New Brunswick takeover. They had rented a place downtown Toronto, the province had, and they had a couple of they had like St. John and Fredericton and a couple of other places. I think we were one of the only world folks that were able to take advantage of this. So we were there. There was thousands of people that went through this. There was a contest for whale watching tours that we had put on. So people could enter like a draw for free whale watching tour. It was sponsored. And there's all kinds of entries for that. As a result of this display that we had, and once I get all the pictures, I'll show it to you all, but we now have we don't have it in our possession because it's still in Ontario, but we have a 6-foot tall whale tail, 3D. There's part of the display. There's also a cutout of the Campbell Lighthouse that people put their face through and get their pictures taken and selfies and stuff.
I charge for that image, you know.
So we'll have to work something out on that. Anyway, well attended, and it was sort of a kickstart to the tourism initiative. Our website is, as I mentioned before, is progressing well. I've seen the working state of it. It looks good. We're gonna have a light version up very shortly in order to capture search engine traffic and to get things listed and get indexed, with more functionality to come in a couple of months. And the guidebook is being developed as well, so it's an actual, it's nice, it's good. Guidebook, a smaller version that you could take with you. So more to come on that. So Economic Social Inclusion Corporation, moving on, as so they're into their OPT4, they're overcoming poverty 4. So every so often they redo a strategy, which is what they call OPT4. So they have consultations that involves our community development coordinator. So you'll see this stuff advertised here and there about the overcoming poverty together, and that's what that's about. And so he's been fairly involved with that among other projects. Finally, so our new recycling program, we've had several discussions with Circular Materials. We are pretty close to being able to sign an agreement with them for our facility. The end result of this will be that to residents, nothing will change. So it's the same, you know, at least initially, shouldn't be any different. In fact, the same trucks are probably going to be picking it up. You know, I can't speak for Circular Materials or who they contract with, but my understanding is that there's really not going to be much of a change visible to residents. The difference is, of course, that this all still comes to our facility. It all still gets onto and forwarded onto the sorting facility. The difference is that no longer costs us money. So that's it's gonna be a good impact to our budget. As we progress, you know, some things may change, and one of the things that should be changing, I don't have definitive answers on yet, are the new things that are added to the program. So that's glass, styrofoam, and plastic film. I don't know, they're supposed to be doing that, but I don't know what the arrangement is for those things yet. When I do know, I'll let you know, but I know they're negotiating with a couple of possible contractors or depots where they can take that stuff to. And that's what I have, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Any comments or questions for Hollis on that one?
I get a question there, you said about holding the CAO roundtable. We don't have a CAO, do we have any
We
representative?
invited him in.
Okay, did she go?
I don't remember.
Okay. I just want.
She might have been, I don't know.
No, I mean, if not, you can put my name on there or whatever thing is there, I don't mind, but.
Okay.
Makes it hard when you're a small community that don't have a full staff.
Okay. The next item we have on the agenda is the financial update. And again, that's Hollis.
So the financial update that I have for you this month is the actual end of January one. Last year I had kind of last month, I had kind of an estimated one because we were still doing year end. And I don't have the February one. It's not ready yet, but this is the actual January numbers. Not very much different at all from what I already presented, but just a quick run through. financially, we're still in a good, position. And even with the reduced amount of waste coming in, we are still in a surplus in solid waste. Mostly because we haven't spent big money on any one thing, in solid waste, but, we are still, let me flip to the solid waste one here. Yeah, so 114,000 surplus in solid waste so far, which is good. It's because you will see a percent of annual budget under the expenditures is quite low in most categories, and that's because we haven't spent big money there. That should be a 1 month, which works out to 8.2% would be the target, 8.4%, I think. We are, in terms of revenue for solid waste, we are right on target for members garbage. We are a little higher in ICI, but we are missing some C&D, and we are missing some other sources of income there. The rest of the stuff that's in this particular financial report is fairly basic. You guys don't need me to read every number to you. I will tell you that our audit has been completed. I have not been alerted to anything out of the ordinary. And I don't have the report back on it yet. They're still working on that at our auditors. But that will be out in the next couple of weeks and available to be presented at the AGM. That is my report, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Any comments or questions for our CEO?
Not really specifically to the financials, but I was wondering, we talked about meeting with CMHC, and I don't have a date in the calendar. Have they confirmed about willing to meet with us to review our applications for the Accelerator Fund?
Xander and I met with I forget what his title is, and I asked him to bring that back, but I haven't heard. He's promised to come back with something, but I haven't heard back from him yet. But I will make a note to follow up, Brad.
Thanks for that.
Okay. Anything else anybody would like to bring up on budget?
Danny has one.
Just a quick question, well, it might be two. Regional transportation, the brackets 143 and the tourism promotions, are they negatives? I'm assuming, but
Yeah, but it's only for January, so it's they're not negative because we didn't have money. It's negative because we didn't have the money yet.
okay. I'm just wondering, is regional transportations hasn't met, so I was just curious of why.
No, but regional transportation, and I'm kind of glad you opened the door on that conversation. We need to have a bigger conversation around what that is, but regional transportation is currently, Dial-A-Ride is our, we support, and we support that through a grant from ESIC, through to them, but we've also had several, in fact, I have one tomorrow morning, a meeting tomorrow morning with the executive director there of Dial-A-Ride, and we need to bring that transportation committee back to talk about what that direction is going to look like for them. Ideally, we want to expand their offering or help them expand their offering. Anyway, more on that to come, but that's what regional transportation is at the moment.
But there's been no meetings on it, so, okay. Yeah,
That was it, Danny?
yeah,
Thank you. A big piece of that regional transportation, if you look, you'll see administration, and then allocation from corporate services. So some of these things will have allocations from corporate as just the overhead of the service, and that's just splitting up the costs of, well, me and Mark and Claudette and, our office building and things like that.
Uh, I don't really have anything else on here, for the agenda. But there was another article that you had sent out to us, Hollis, that was, the community planning framework for housing. Was that just to, read over and have a look at?
Yeah, that was the subject of our CAO roundtable. With our planning staff and CAOs, and we had Housing Hub there. So I sent it to you because it's a good, it's just a reference that, was created by our planning staff, but it's a good reference to show the process of how that goes. And it's not too difficult, to read through, but it shows the roles of the Service Commission, the role of the municipality, the role of council, where they need to step in, and how that whole process goes. So so I thought it would be something that may be of interest more than anything.
Okay, good. Yeah, I did read through it. I thought that was interesting. Yeah. But I just wasn't sure whether we were gonna bring it up here or not. And, so, well, thank you for that, sending that out. Before we go to upcoming meetings, we don't have anything else on the agenda. Is there anything anybody would like to bring up before we move on? Okay. Upcoming meetings, we have a committee of the whole on the April the 11th at 5:30, and will that be in St. Stephen, Hollis?
As far as I know, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
We have a board meeting in the EGM on the 25th of April. And we had thought about going out to the landfill site, I believe, for that.
Yep.
Okay.
I believe what we'll do there, Mr. Chair, is we'll be there at, like, say 4, to give tours and if anybody wants to look around, and we'll have a food truck available for some eats there and some other things available. So hopefully you'll have good enough weather and have a good look at the site and where we are.
Okay, and then I see we have an RCMP annual priorities meeting on the 16th of April. And
yeah, so if you remember, I sent out asking for some dates, when it'd be suitable, and April 16th looked like the one that worked for most people. So I contacted RCMP and they were good with that date too, so.
good.
Location?
Location is Wall Street currently.
So we have April 11th and April 16th will be at Wall Street, and the April 25th meeting will be at the
Landfill.
right out of my head, the landfill site. Okay. Any questions or comments from the public?
No, Mr. Chair, but I do want to remind everybody that I will be away after starting next week, and I will be back on April 9th.
Okay,
I will have other people in place to handle anything that might come up.
sounds good. Thank you very much. Since there's nothing else, I will accept a motion to adjourn. Thanks, John.
You're welcome.